In this video lesson, we're going to be taking a very practical approach to color, and we will speak about theory briefly, but only to show how it can be practically applied in retouching. There is more theory to learn, and we recommend that you do some research, but what we will share with you here will be the minimal knowledge and understanding of color theory that any pro retoucher needs. So let's take a look at the very basics of the color wheel. There are different color wheels, but we're going to be using the one that you're most likely familiar with from painting and art classes as a child. In this color wheel, we have our primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, with our primary colors being red, yellow, and blue. Our secondary colors being when you mix two primary colors, and that would be orange, green, and violet. And then our tertiary colors being when you mix a primary color with a secondary color, such as yellow-orange. So when you've got different combinations on the color wheel, some combinations are more pleasing to the human eye than other combinations. And some of these pleasing combinations are analogous combinations, which is any 3 consecutive colors on the color wheel. Then you've got complementary colors, which are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. And split complementary, which is a base color, and then the 2 colors adjacent to its complementary color. Triadic, which is any 3 colors that are evenly spaced on the color wheel. And lastly, double complementary. That is just 2 sets of complementary colors, also evenly spaced on the color wheel. Then lastly, you've got your warm colors and your cool colors. So why does color theory matter in retouching, and why is it important for us retouchers to know? And I think it's important because, especially when it comes to grading, your knowledge of color theory can help you affect the mood and feel of your image, as well as can help you create some pleasing combinations of colors. So when it comes to mood and feel, warm colors traditionally speak to energy, intensity, and passion, while cooler colors speak to tranquility and professionalism. And you can very much affect the mood and feel of an image in how you grade it. And when it comes to pleasing combinations, we can take a look at some examples of some images with that. So we've got a complementary image here, and obviously this was planned in the actual capture, and that will be the same for all of these examples. But the retouch can very much enhance what was captured as well. So you've obviously got your red and your green, which would be a complementary color scheme. Then you've got this image with the makeup would be split complementary. So got your cooler color that would be more opposite on the color wheel to these 2 warmer colors. And that obviously gives a very nice effect. And in your retouching, you can be aware of what the art director and the makeup artist and the photographer were going for, and you can use the color grading to enhance that vision. Then we've got an example of an analogous color scheme, and obviously the skin tones have been kept nice and warm here, and that blends in nicely with these oranges and reds, and then the nice warm browns of the eye. Then let's take a look at this last example, which is a mixture of color schemes actually. So we've got the more analogous makeup, and then if you contrast that with the warmer makeup and the cooler eye color, that's more of a complementary scheme. So this one's quite an interesting one. And if we were to take a look at how to apply that ourselves, when it comes to beauty retouching, you generally don't do too much grading. It's very subtle when you do it. There are other forms of retouching that you can get more creative in, such as fashion. Often the grade can be quite intense and creative, but with beauty, it tends to be more subtle. That doesn't mean, though, that you can't affect an image and use some color theory to enhance an image. And in this image, I'm just going to show you a quick example of how to use the background and contrast that with the foreground to create a complementary color grade. So we've added blue, which is the opposite to the red there, and that's given a complementary grade to the image that makes it really effective, and there's nice color contrast. It really brings that image out. Alternatively, you can take a slightly different route and go for an analogous grade, and you can make the background a similar shade to the hair, and you can have the warm red tones flowing through that image. And so that's an example of how you can apply color theory in your image grade. Apart from color theory, there's color management in images, which is very important, especially when it comes to consistency across sets of images. We do have a video lesson on image processing, and this is the first step when it comes to color consistency for a retoucher. You hope to work with images that have been captured consistently as well, where the photographers use the same lighting with the same white balance settings on their camera. And you would hope that they haven't used auto white balance, but instead have used a preset such as Flash if they're shooting in studio, which will help with making sure that the colors stay consistent in the images. And when you're processing your files, I'll just recap some of the things I've mentioned in that video here. And what I do is I choose one reference image and I copy across the settings that I've processed that one reference image with to the rest of the images. And then I compare them, and if any of the images need tweaking to match that reference image, I'll do that. And then I'll double check across the whole set to make sure that nothing deviated, and I'll export those images. I'll retouch that reference image first, and I'll create the grade for that reference image in Photoshop. And this is going to be the image that I'm going to treat as my reference image here. So I've got my overall colors, and I've got some groups in my local colors, and I've made some big changes, well, not big, but broad changes to the groups such as the hair and the background. I haven't made very many broad changes to the skin. So I need to now make sure that with the rest of the images from the set, or the other image that we're going to be looking at in the set, these same adjustment layers are copied across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Window, Arrange, and I'm going to go 2 up vertical. I've got a lot of different options here depending on how many images I have and how I would like to view them, but I'm going to go 2 up vertical, and that's going to put my images next to each other. And what I've got in my second image is I've done the retouching, just a very natural retouch, and I've prepared my masks, and I've done some local color corrections on the skin, but I am going to use the color corrections from this image when it comes to the hair and the background, as those were broad changes. So I'm going to go into this image, and I'm going to go to my foreground, go into the hair group, and I'm going to copy across that layer, and I'm going to put it in the hair group of this image. And that's just taking some of the blue out of the hair and making it look a little bit more natural. Then I'm going to get the next group, which had a broad change, and that was the background. And I'm going to go into the background group of this image, and I'm going to drag it across into the background group of this image, just to neutralize that background slightly. If we zoom that out and then go Window, Arrange, Match All, that'll match the perspectives on the images. So we've got our local color adjustments are now the same in both images, and we can drag the overall color corrections across as well. You may want to, when you're retouching, drag the overall color corrections before you do your dodging and burning so that you can see how they're affecting your image. But just for simplicity's sake and the purpose of this demonstration, I'm copying them across after I've done all my retouching. But it is an option to copy them across as soon as you start your retouching. So I'm going to drag this there across, and I've got my overall color corrections. And you might think that looking at that, that's enough. We've done enough. We've captured the images the same. We've processed them the same, and now we've used the same color adjustment layers on them. So they're surely going to look the same. Well, that does get us very far, but not quite far enough. It's very slight changes in conditions can make changes in the colors or brightness of the image. And what I've found is that even viewing them side by side like this, it doesn't give you an accurate enough read on whether they're consistent or not. So what I do, just to help my eye, is I create a copy merge layer of my reference image, and I label it ref for reference, and I drag that across to the image that I'm now working with, and I'm just going to get some of this Generally, I don't crop my images in processing the raws. I crop them in Photoshop, which is why this reference image has a crop on it. But I don't need that crop right now, so I'm going to just make a selection and I'm going to invert it, and I'm just going to delete those pixels. So now I've got my reference image, and I'm going to transform it to just make it a similar size to the image I'm working on. Something like that. And I'm going to enter that to apply it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the marquee tool here, and I'm going to add a layer mask that shows half of my reference image. And as you can see, whilst they looked quite consistent side by side, when they're right next to each other and you've got that skin tone directly on top of the skin tone that we're trying to match, it doesn't look the same. So, and if we invert this to see what it looks like from the other side, again, it doesn't look the same. The skin tones aren't consistent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now go Window, Arrange, and Consolidate all to tabs. I'm just going to zoom in here and look at what the differences are. And whilst this looks a little bit funny, you can see that it does give us an idea of what those differences are. For instance, I think that this image is lighter, the skin is lighter, and possibly a little bit less contrasty than the reference image that we've got. And the background looks good enough and consistent, and the hair looks good enough and consistent. It's mainly that skin tone. I think I'm going to go into the overall group and I'm going to get the contrast. I'm going to get this point on the curve here. I'm actually not going to use my pen to adjust this. I'm going to use my keyboard. I want to make a very small adjustment, so I'm going to use the down arrow key, and I'm just going to darken this image ever so slightly. And I think that something like that is a little bit better. I want to just look at this a little bit more, maybe invert that mask again, and I'm going to pull it to the side. You've got to just play around a bit. I think maybe we've gone too far with darkening now. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull that up a bit. Yeah, something like that. And I think this needs a bit more blue in it. So I'm going to go into the blue channel in the color. And again, I'm using the keyboard to just a bit more blue. Something like that. Looks a little better. And I'm just going to zoom out a bit. I'm going to shift and click on the mask to just get rid of it or disable it. And I'm going to flick through those two. And I think they're looking closer. The bottom one needs more green. So I'm going to go into the color layer. I'm going to get the green. I'm going to add a point. And I'm going to up by 1 point and see what that looks like. That looks closer to me. And I think there's more red in the shadows on the reference image. So I'm going to go again into color, get the reds. I'm going to take this point and I'm going to take it down to the shadows, and I'm going to just up them slightly. And that is looking closer to me now. Let's enable the mask and pull that to the side to see. I think I might still up that contrast. I think I still took it a little bit too dark. Something like that is looking better. And you really do have to just move the reference image around. If you want to, you can make a different mask for it and apply a different mask that you can just see the face. Generally, it's the face and background are your two major concerns. And I think that's now looking close enough. So I can disable my reference image and I can go Window, Arrange, 2-up vertical again. And I think that that is looking good. So that's a simple trick to use to be able to get color consistency in your images in Photoshop. Just have your process the same, have your overall color corrections the same. If you've made any broad local color changes, then use those as well. And then lastly, use that reference layer to help you see what you need to do. And I hope you found that useful. Just a brief overview of color theory and how to apply it in retouching, as well as how to manage color across your images.